All for One's Guide to a Peaceful Retirement, written by ScottishSunshine and read for you by Eleanor Elizabeth. Chapter 39. Mum Can Make Everything Just a Little Better. Summary. Izuku takes the news about All for One about as well as could be expected. Izuku, aged 14. I was All for One. Izuku stares at his father. He must have... Papa can't, What? He chokes out, even as the room seems to spin and his lungs aren't getting enough air and he can't breathe, he can't think. His papa can't be a villain. That's impossible. This is a nightmare. There is no way. Zuku. Papa's not a villain. He's friends with heroes. They visit Eden regularly. There is no way. Izuku. His mum wouldn't have married a villain, and his papa has a proper job, and he's played heroes with Izuku, and he took Izuku out for ice cream, and whoever heard of a villain that is a good parent? Izuku, breathe. Papa, no, not Papa. All for One finally breaks through his spiraling thoughts, and Izuku gasps and leans forward as he struggles to remember how to get oxygen into his body. I'm sorry to spring this on you, but why? Izuku gasps out as soon as he can, because that is the question he needs to know the answer to. Why? I had some ideas when I was younger. The man behind the desk lets out a humorless laugh. I thought the world... No, not that, Izuku interrupts him. It's probably a terrible idea, interrupting a supervillain, especially one with as many quirks as his father has. Oh God, it explains so much. Some inner part of him screams, but Izuku is feeling, well, rather hysterical. Why? Why have a child? Did you want another person with All for One? Do you want me to join you? Because I won't, The words hurt as he forces them out, like they're shards of glass, but this has to be said. He might never be able to become a hero, but he is not going to become a villain no matter what. There is some dastardly scheme going on here, he's sure of it. But no matter what, Izuku won't help All for One. Not for anything. Not even if it's the only way for his papa to hug him again. But the man behind the desk doesn't react the way Izuku would expect from a fearsome villain. He doesn't laugh at Izuku's naivete, doesn't inform him of just what his resistance will cost him. Instead, his face crumples, like he's in physical pain, and he looks like he's about to cry. Izuku, I swear to you. He pauses to swallow. Izuku, I never had any intention. I would never. You're my little boy. He stands, obviously intending to come around the desk, and Izuku can't help but flinch. And it's like he's punched his father, because the man freezes, and they just stare at each other. And Izuku realizes he no longer recognizes the man in front of him. And somehow, that realization has him opening his mouth and, "You're not my papa." The words seem to echo in the small room. And suddenly, Izuku he can't stay here anymore, because it was all a lie, because this life never existed. His papa, Hisashi Midoriya, never existed, and the man standing before him is a perfect stranger, capable of destroying the whole of Japan, and Izuku bolts from the room and sprints down the stairs, and he hears the man call after him, but he doesn't stop, doesn't slow down, because he doesn't know what he should do, and he's only 14, and he's scared, and there's nothing that could possibly make this better, because he can't just go and ask his papa for a hug, because his papa is gone. No, worse than gone. His papa never existed in the first place. Hisashi Midoriya was just a persona, a mask created by a villain. Izuku barely even stops to put on his shoes before he's out of the house and running down the street as fast as his legs will carry him. He doesn't know if All for One will come after him, but he just needs some space. Needs to think, to breathe. And was anything real? Did they really have bath time and bedtime stories? And did Izuku really make snowmen and get to cuddle with his father after a bad dream? Or was all of that just a lie? Were those just false memories implanted in his mind so he would not question All for One when the time came? Did Inko Midoriya... Izuku almost trips as the worst possible question appears in his mind. Did Inko Midoriya even exist? Is the small beloved quirk that Izuku can feel even now just another part of the disguise? Something All for One decided was small and harmless enough to give to a young child? Did it come from some random person on the street? No, Izuku immediately shakes his head. He can't. He needs his mother at least to remain real. He cannot accept that the kind, loving woman from all those photos who wrote him so many letters was just some paid actress. And so, even as it starts to rain, Izuku sets off to the one place he knows he'll feel safe, to see the one person who can surely make everything better. Izuku goes to see his mum. The cemetery is just as he remembers, and it soothes something inside him, because at least it's real. And when he finally sees the familiar grave marker, he picks up his pace, almost sprinting to it, and then just stops to stare because the name on it is still Inko Midoriya, and that's such a relief he can't help but start sobbing, because even if the whole world is falling apart, at least this is real. At least his mum existed. At least he didn't just get given some random quirk. He doesn't know how long he stays there, isn't sure at which point he just collapses to the ground. He wraps his arms around himself, almost like he's afraid he'll start coming apart like his world. Or maybe it's because he wants someone to hug him and comfort him and assure him that everything will be alright. He wants his mum. He wants his papa. He wants... Young Madara? Is everything alright? Izuku frowns, confused, and half turns, desperately trying to get his sobs under control. He's almost sure he started hallucinating because standing there safely under a red umbrella is All Might, a bakery box in hand. Chapter 40. All Might has his uses. Summary. All Might helps Izuku through his crisis. Oh, and All for One is vanquished. Izuku aged 14. For just a split second, Izuku considers telling All Might everything. It would be the right thing to do after all. His father is a supposedly dead villain, and if anyone is capable of defeating him, of saving Izuku, surely it would be All Might. But then he discards that idea, and although he wishes he could say it was because he's afraid of how All Might would treat him, or that the hero wouldn't believe him, deep down he knows that's not the case. Izuku can't tell All Might, because, lie or not, he still loves his papa. Madara! All Might frowns and steps forward, and for the second time that day, Izuku's mouth opens, and without quite meaning to, he speaks. My name's not Madara. It's not? All Might glances over his shoulder, and probably sees the inscription on the grave because he groans. Midoriya! I wondered why I couldn't find anyone named Madara. This whole situation is so absurd, the small part of Izuku that is still somewhat sane notes. But then again, the whole day so far has just been absurd, like some strange dream, and perhaps it's that strangeness that finally helps Izuku stop crying. He wipes his nose on his sleeve, because really, All for One has much bigger things to punish him for than that, and finally places the name. Isn't Madara a character in Naruto? He asks. Yes, and not just any character, one of the villains. It's strange, just another strangeness on top of a day full of weirdness, but Izuku can't help but start to giggle. And then he laughs, deep, full-bodied, slightly hysterical laughs, and maybe there are a few tears. And when he's finally done, All Might is staring at him, obviously concerned, and Izuku just feels empty. Perhaps we should go somewhere? All Might suggests hesitantly. How about some tea? Izuku doesn't want tea. Izuku doesn't want anything except to crawl into bed and fall asleep and never wake up. But he knows he can't, and he probably shouldn't, go home, and he doesn't really know what he should do, so he follows All Might out of the cemetery. The streets are mostly empty, although Izuku still attracts a few odd looks before they finally reach a small cafe. They grab a small, discreet table in the back and order drinks. Izuku finally notices his soaked clothes and shivers as he waits for his tea. He can feel All Might's eyes on him, but he just... What should he say? Is everything all right, Midoriya? All Might finally asks. Did you have a fight with your father, or something like that? Izuku sighs. They sit in silence for a minute as the waitress brings them their order, and then something occurs to him. How do you even know my name? I owe your father a great debt. You what? Izuku gasps. All Might owes All for One. How? Why? What connection does the #1 hero have to the shadowy villain that has just torpedoed Izuku's life? Oh yes, All Might smiles. He gave me some excellent advice when I first adopted my son. All for One gave the #1 hero parenting advice. The whole world is officially insane. Yes, but how did you meet? Izuku asks, almost afraid of the answer. All for One no doubt arranged some great coincidence so he could get close to All Might. It makes so much sense. He has no doubt that it's so that when the time is right, he can... He was at my mentor's grave, All Might sighs. Your mother had apparently just passed, and I have been a hero for over 20 years, and I have never seen a man so broken. I wasn't even sure whether I should let him walk home alone. It was obvious just how much your mother's death devastated him. Izuku stares at the man. If he hadn't trained himself out of the habit, he would be muttering, because why would All for One mourn his mum? Shouldn't he be relieved she was out of the way? If he was so upset, then he couldn't possibly have anything to do with her death. Izuku latches onto that thought because it makes sense. If All for One really loved his mum, then he wouldn't hurt her. She really did die from cancer, and All for One mourned her because he loved her. And if he loved her, maybe he loves Izuku too? I almost didn't recognize him the next time I saw him. All Might treats Izuku to a smile. You were with him, you know, telling your mother about some new friend, and I almost couldn't believe it because he was so different. It was obvious that caring for you helped him with his grief. His new friend, Tenya. Izuku almost nods, because now he has confirmation that at least some of his memories really did happen. But then, why Tenya? Why would All for One encourage his son to be friends with the child of well-respected heroes? Why put up with all of Tensei's teasing? What did he have to gain? Why? Why would he allow Izuku to tell his friends about a quirk as recognizable as All for One? And you, I'd seen you at an event, and you were so happy. I would never have guessed the loss you had just suffered. All Might chuckles. And I thought your father must know what he's doing. And then there is the biggest question of all. Why would All for One allow, no, encourage, Izuku's dreams of becoming a hero? I don't know what happened between you. All Might reaches out to pat Izuku on the shoulder. But I always thought you were lucky to have such a loving father. So, please, try and talk this out with your father. I'm sure he has his reasons for whatever he did. And that's the answer, Izuku realizes. That's the piece he's been missing. No, not missing, willfully ignoring. Because why tell him? Why would All for One tell a child set on becoming a hero about his true identity? Why did he not stop Izuku from running out of the door? Why did he look so heartbroken? Because he was. Because he told Izuku out of fear. Because he knew if he lied now and Izuku found out in the future, there would be no coming back from that. If everyone believes All for One is dead, it means he has not been doing anything to attract attention. Because he loves Izuku. And Izuku suddenly realizes that his father thinks that he hates him, and he probably won't stay, won't remain Hisashi Midoriya, won't be there when Izuku returns home from school, won't let Izuku stay up because there's a fascinating quirk on TV. He'll likely return to his life of crime, and then Izuku will never get to hug his papa again. Thank you! He shouts and he jumps up, almost collides with one of the waitresses as he takes off, sprinting for the door, because what if Papa's already gone? No, he's not gone. Izuku won't accept that. If he's gone, Izuku will just have to summon him back. Young Midoriya! All Might calls after him. Where are you? To hug Papa! Izuku yells over his shoulder and narrowly avoids crashing into a young couple. It's still raining when he emerges onto the street, but Izuku doesn't care about that. doesn't care that he's probably going to get sick. Izuku Midoriya needs to save the world, and his papa, from All for One. It's raining. All for One, glares at the rain, because Izuku is out there somewhere, and he didn't take his coat, or an umbrella. He could catch a cold, or pneumonia. But no, he shakes his head. He no longer has the right to worry about Izuku. The boy made that quite clear. If he wants to do anything more for him, if he doesn't want to provoke any more resentment than what he already deserves, he should just go. Make sure everything is set up so Izuku will be well provided for, can do whatever he wants in life, and leave before the boy returns. The boy. All for One shakes his head. This is for the best. He can come out of retirement early, and he needs to start planning. Needs to gather his former followers. Yes, that's a good move. He reaches out for the phone, because he can call the good doctor, and then he groans in frustration and runs his hand through his hair. He's not quite ready to talk with the man. He needs to get himself back into the right mindset. Make sure Hisashi Midoriya is well and truly gone. Of course, he realizes, his face. That has to go. He closes his eyes and grimaces as he shifts his features back to those of All for One. And then he opens them again, and his gaze lands on a photo of a 4-year-old Izuku, beaming as he poses with Hisashi, and All for One gasps as a knife in his chest twists, and suddenly, it's all too much. All for One collapses into his chair. He slams the photo face down on the desk so he doesn't have to see it, and he sobs, because how can he make this better? When he lost his brother, none of his power, his quirks, his schemes, none of it made it better. And then he lost Inko, and what helped then? Why was it different? What chased the pain of loss away? How can he make this stop? Just let Papa sit with you a little while, all right? Do you want another story? Tickle attack! Thank you, Izuku. Just stay my little boy a little longer. I love you too, Izuku. All for One stares numbly down at his hands because there is no point. There is nothing that will make this pain stop. There is nothing worth fighting for. Then he angrily wipes at his eyes and makes his decision. He'll call All Might. He'll call All Might and tell him he's still alive, and then there's a crash from downstairs, and a pounding on the stairs. And All for One stands up, just as Izuku, dripping with water, bursts through the study door. Don't go! The boy yells and throws himself at him, his arms wrapping themselves around him like he's terrified that All for One will vanish. Don't go! Please, don't go! I'm not ready! Please, don't leave! I don't care! Don't leave yet! Just pretend you never told me! Please, Papa, just stay! Please! You're soaking wet. All for One, or is he Hisashi, observes numbly, and Izuku lets out a rather wet laugh. See? You can't leave yet! He grins as he looks up, tears in his eyes. If you leave, I'll just catch pneumonia, or run into a collapsing building to save a cat, or get distracted and walk off a bridge. So just stay my papa for a little while longer. Something warm settles in Hisashi's chest, as, for the first time ever, his son looks up at his true face. He smiles and presses his lips to the boy's forehead and whispers, I promise, I will stay for as long as you need me. Forever, Izuku immediately replies. Let's just say forever for now, and we can decide later. Later, Hisashi nods, even though there's no decision to be made. He'll stay forever. Chapter 41. But sometimes, honesty is the best policy. Summary. Hisashi answers a few questions and tells Izuku the story of All for One and One for All. His version. Izuku, aged 14. Papa? Yes, Izuku? Hisashi smiles as he sets down his book. He's noticed that his son, there have never been sweeter words, he is sure, than his son, seems to have been using the term a lot more often than before, but then he supposes it makes sense. It's probably a lot harder to connect the word with all for one. I was wondering. Izuku hesitates at the entrance to the study. Then he squares his shoulders, takes a deep breath, and asks, Could you tell me a little about all for one? He really should have expected this, Hazashi knows. For a split second, he wishes he could refuse, close the door on that chapter of his life completely and move on. But Izuku deserves the full truth, so he nods and stands up. All right, but not here. Izuku glances around the study and nods. Apparently Hazashi is not the only one with rather unpleasant memories of their little talk. They end up raiding the kitchen. Izuku, somehow, with his mysterious teenage powers, finds Kurogiri's emergency muffins, and Hazashi, aware he'll probably need the emotional support, grabs his wedding photo from the living room as he waits for the kettle to boil. Then, they retreat to the master bedroom and spread their loot out on Hazashi's bed. All right, Izuku. He takes a deep breath and makes himself comfortable. What would you like to know? Well, Izuku pretends to think as he picks up a biscuit, but Hazashi's not fooled. His son probably has memorized a whole list of questions. He wonders whether Izuku has a hidden recording device somewhere in the room. Then he dismisses that thought, because Izuku isn't that foolish. Was Mum a villain? No. Hazashi glances down at the photo and smiles. She was just a normal civilian. As far as I know, she only noticed something strange about me when she started getting sick. He winces at the memory. I was careless. I was desperate for something that could... He breaks off to wipe at his eyes and manages to chuckle when Izuku hugs him. It's okay, Izuku mumbles. Just, you loved her, didn't you? I did, Hazashi smiles. I still do. If there's one thing I wish I could do. For a second, they sit in silence. Then, Izuku takes a deep breath. Why have a child, though? Were you going to use me, but was it to give you a better cover story, or... Hazashi hesitates. Then he decides Izuku deserves honesty. I didn't want children, he admits. I had no use for them, and it would put me in danger. A child capable of taking quirks, born to a father with fire breath and a mother with attraction. So you didn't want me? Not at first, no. Hazashi sighs. He wishes the next words didn't taste like ash on his tongue. But Inko, she was so happy, and I thought I could pretend to be excited. There would be a day when I wouldn't come back, but if we had a child, Inko wouldn't be alone, only... He chuckles at the memory and shakes his head. At some point, I realized I wasn't pretending anymore. And then, when you were born, you were so small, so perfect, It was like there had been something missing all my life, and... Oh, Izuku, I loved you from the moment I first saw you. This time, he pulls Izuku into a hug. He holds his son, rubs his back, and hopes his little boy can feel all the love he feels for him. And he ignores Izuku's occasional hiccups. Finally, the teenager seems to have calmed down. He pulls back and accepts the tissue. How did you and Mum meet? She was being mugged. Hazashi chuckles at the memory. She lived in a pretty rough area, got attacked by some thug with a knife, and I happened to be nearby. I took her for coffee, and we swapped numbers, and, well, the rest is history. What, you didn't murder the mugger? Izuku jokes. Not at that time, no. Papa! Izuku chokes on his saliva. Hazashi laughs and helps himself to a muffin. Before you became... Were you born Hazashi Midoriya? No. Hazashi sighs. He really wishes he could lie about this. I just made that name up on the spot. For just a second, Izuku stares at him. Then, because the universe hates Hazashi and cursed him with the smartest child imaginable, he lets out a long snort and bursts into loud laughter. You went with Midoriya! Midori! She had beautiful green eyes, Hazashi protests half-heartedly. Midori? Izuku collapses sideways. Midori! Hazashi sighs, shoots a glare over his shoulder, because if there are dead heroes in the room, he's sure Izuku isn't the only one laughing, and resigns himself to a long wait. Finally, Izuku calms down. Although he still has a grin on his face, he wipes his eyes and sits back up. So, what was your original name? Hisashi Shigaraki, he winces. His old name never fails to leave a bad taste in his mouth. Izuku Shigaraki. Izuku tries out the sound. I prefer Midoriya, Hisashi sighs. They sit in silence for a few minutes, then Izuku shifts and asks, So, all for one? What would you like to know? Papa asks with a sigh. Izuku considers his question carefully. Ever since his father told him, and since he ran into All Might, he's been piecing things together, finally making sense of all the weirdness that is his life. So, he decides to start out with an easy question. Was Makia one of your, lackeys? Yes, Papa chuckles. He was my bodyguard. You know how you're not allowed to give people multiple quirks? Izuku nods, unsure where this is going. It overwhelms most people. I've seen it kill. Gigantomachia, he's one of the few people who could handle it. He's always been devoted to me. But why is he here? Izuku frowns. Wouldn't he be a liability? What if someone recognized him? And he's not exactly subtle. Izuku. Papa pauses. When I retired, I convinced everyone that All for One was dead. And how do you think Gigantomachia would react if he thought his lord had been killed? Izuku makes the mistake of trying to imagine that. Then he shakes his head, looks at his father in the eye and says, Good call. Gee, thanks. His father rolls his eyes. For just a second, it's easy to pretend they're not talking about anything serious, that this is just them enjoying father-son time. But then Izuku remembers the stranger with his father's voice, and he knows. Nothing will ever be quite the same. So, how did you do it? He asks. Why did you do it? Why retire? Inko, she knew she was dying. Papa breaks off to wipe his eyes, and Izuku shifts closer, hoping to provide some sort of comfort. And, more than anything, she was worried about you. She pointed out that with her gone, if I were defeated, you'd be all alone. So you retired to play house because Mom told you to? Yes. His father nods, completely serious. Izuku stares at him for a second, almost expecting him to chuckle and say that he was just joking. Then he glances over at a photo of his mother and makes a mental note. His mum was a fucking badass. I have a quirk capable of rewriting memories, so it was not difficult, Papa continues. As far as the world knows, All for One died in a fight with the seventh holder of All for One, Nana Shimura. Nana Shimura, Izuku mumbles. He'll have to look her up later and check the headstones near Mum, 'cause Then something occurs to him. Was she connected to All Might? You have done your research, Papa chuckles. She passed One for All to All Might before she died. All Might has All for One, Izuku gasps. Holy crap, he's one of the few people that knows the secret of the number one hero's quirk. He shakes his head, because he still has questions, and now is not the time to geek out over All Might's quirk. Then he takes a deep breath and asks, Why is it called that? I mean, All for One, One for All. What's the connection? The more he pondered it, the more he was sure there had to be a connection, even with the limited information that he had. Not just because of the similar names, but also for there to be a quirk All for One can't take. That can't be a simple coincidence. You're too smart, Izuku, Papa sighs. It's a long story. Tell me, please? All right, Izuku. I was born before the general public became aware of the existence of quirks. Hell, the term did not exist yet. There were, of course, people with quirks, but only those born with obvious mutations were noticed, and the government was trying to keep them hidden. Some families, they were glad to be rid of those freaks. Others refused to give up their children and went into hiding. Of course, I was not aware of all of this. I was not even aware that I had a quirk. I wouldn't have cared anyway. I was just a child. My world revolved around my school, my home, and my brother. Yes, Izuku, you have had an uncle. His name was Yoshido, and I loved him so much. I was older than him, and he was a very sickly child. Our father, he was a drunk, and our mother worked long hours, so I cared for Yoshido most of the time. I sang to him, I played with him. He was my world. Our childhood was far from perfect, though. Father, he was violent. I shielded Yoshido as much as I could, but I was still a child myself, and then, when I was your age, my mother died, and I couldn't do it anymore. I stuffed up some things into my school bag, waited until my father was asleep, grabbed Yoshido, and left. It was hard to describe what the world had become by then. Society had crumbled. Government was little more than an abstract concept. Those without quirks attacked those with them. Those with quirks attacked those without. Picture the worst scenes from some disaster movie and amplify them by 20 times. That was my reality. But I didn't care. Yoshido was safe and with me, and that was all I needed. I took odd jobs where I could, got pretty good at shoplifting. I even tutored Oshido. I didn't need a quirk to be happy. I didn't think I had one. But then, I was on my way home. I'd just gotten paid, I had food, and I brought Yoshido a comic book for his birthday. Only, I got ambushed by 3 thugs. They had quirks. They outmatched me. I thought I was going to die. All I could do was lie there and take it, and I thought, if I was stronger, I could stop being a victim. If I was stronger, I could protect Yoshido. If I had a quirk, I could fight back. And that's when I discovered I did. When I limped back to our campsite, I had 3 new quirks. Over the next few weeks, I tested my new abilities. I pushed myself, and as I looked around me, I realized I could bring order to the chaos. Because why should people be victimized for something beyond their control? Why force people to live with abilities they did not want? All for One could change that. I could create a new, better Japan. I was something of an idealist when I was younger. So I started planning, started recruiting, finding people who understood my goals, people that wanted to build that new Japan. And I just assumed Yoshido, dear, smart Yoshido, understood too. I didn't notice him drifting away until it was too late. He had no quirk that we knew of, and he did not understand why people would give up their quirks, did not see that to some of them I was a saviour. He just wanted everything to go back to how it had been before. I tried to explain my vision, tried to explain the fear when you are powerless, the desperation that drove people to seek me out, but he wouldn't listen. But he was still my brother, and I still loved him, and I tried to protect him. I tried to keep him safe. But finally, I realized I had to let him go. By that time, though, I had enemies, people that would not hesitate to kill him, and Yoshido was so weak. So I gave him a quirk. Nothing dangerous, nothing that could hurt him, but I just wanted my baby brother to be safe. Only he had a quirk too, and they combined and created one for all, and he passed it on to someone, and when this hero came to confront me, I recognized it. Of course I recognized it. And he told me, the bastard told me that Yoshido was dead. I defeated him, of course, just like I defeated the 3rd holder, and the 4th, but All for One kept being passed on from one hero to the next, and every time I saw it, I couldn't help but think, it wasn't meant for you. After his father stopped speaking, Izuku stares at him. Then the man chokes back a sob and he breaks out of his stupor. He immediately hugs Papa, trying to provide comfort, even as his mind goes into overdrive. You know, you're so like Yoshido. Papa chuckles as he frees his arm and reaches over for his wedding photo. He loved superheroes. We'd curl up in bed together and I'd read him comics. Izuku watches, confused, as his father opens the back of the photo frame. Then his eyes widen and he leans forward, eager because the man has pulled out a small picture. He doesn't recognize the two boys, of course, but it's easy to guess who they are. Yoshido is a small, scrawny boy with long white hair and a kind smile. And next to him, Izuku chokes back a sob and scrambles off the bed. Izuku? He hears his father call after him, a note of fear in his voice, but he doesn't stop, doesn't slow down because Papa will understand. The photo is in its usual place on Izuku's desk. He grabs it and almost trips as he runs back to the master bedroom. Look! He laughs as he shoves the picture at his father. Look! Papa half laughs, half sobs as he takes the frame and places it side by side with the old picture. Put together, the likeness is unmistakable. Izuku might have got his nose, eyes and hair colour from his mother, but the freckles, the untamable curls, the shape of his face, even the grin, they're so similar when comparing father and son around the same age. People always said I look like Mum, Izuku laughs. He didn't mind, really, but he had wished they'd looked more alike. There were times he almost wondered if he really was Papa's, but then he reminded himself that they shared a quirk. But this, it dissolves something nasty and unpleasant that Izuku wasn't even aware he was carrying around in his chest. Thank God you didn't get my nose. It's not that bad. It's massive. Papa shifts his face back to his original features, and Izuku can't help but wince, because it is unfortunate. He also takes the opportunity to examine his father's face, trying to imagine what he'll look like when he's older. No, Izuku, you got the best features of us all. Yoshido's idealism, my freckles, and Inko's everything else. You've got loads of good features. Name 3. Hey guys, it's Eleanor, and I hope you are having a lovely day today. Today's video was brought to you by my neighbour's fireworks. Yes, they are driving me a little bit mad. They've been going all night, all weekend long. Isn't that fun? But, you know, this is the UK. Bonfire night. Nothing like fireworks and toffee apples to celebrate terrorism. That's not true. I mean, we're not celebrating terrorism. We're just celebrating stopping terrorists by burning them alive. What can I say? Us Brits don't take too kindly to treason. Hopefully it wasn't too distracting through the fic. I tried my best to cut as much of it out and re-record lines if it was too loud. But it's about to be over. Just like this fic. There's only going to be like one video left. There's only 3 chapters left after this. So if you've liked it, be sure to like the video to boost my serotonin. Hop down in the comments and we can gush over the fic, and you can tell me about the weird history of holidays where you're from. I'm sure you'll have some great ones. Be sure to subscribe if you want to be notified when I make new videos. And it would be extra nice if you subscribed, because almost at 1,000, I'm not letting myself get any like hopes and feelings or dreams up, because like I might have received my last subscriber. It might be this it from now, but if that would just be really cool, and I think I'd probably cry again. Also, if you have any ideas for what I should do to celebrate 1,000, I'm not gonna jinx it by saying that. If I reach 1,000, what do you think would be a good, cool thing to do? Because we did Q&A for 500, and I just uploaded a bunch of stuff when I hit 100. So you tell me, what ideas do you have? But until I see you again, be sure to practice some self-care. That's right, guzzle down that water. Take a nice nap. Have that shower that you've been struggling to get into because you think it's too much effort. Don't forget to brush your teeth. And yes, that is a threat. And I will catch you all laters.